I'm the Executive Director of CodeX. It's a pleasure to have you all join us for this meeting, which I believe will be very interesting and fun. We have Carla Reyes, who's a law professor at Southern Methodist University, Detman School of Law, and Henning Dietrich, who's the founder and CEO of the Lexan Foundation. They will be our first speakers. They will be talking about a blockchain-based UCC Financing Statement form, and then after Carla and Henning, we'll hear from John Scudado, who will discuss the GREMLIN platform. So yeah, two exciting presentations. I want to see, before we get started, if anyone wanted to share any news with the group. If so, please speak up and unmute yourself so we can hear you. Oh, Lance is like using the chat. He's saying he's gonna be serving on the governance of AI standards committee for the IEEE, which is existing to his efforts with World Economic Forum. Congratulations, Lance. That sounds great, and maybe you can report to us at some point what sort of the main initiatives are on AI governance of the IEEE. So thanks, Lance. Anyone else anything to share? All right, good. Well, then let's get started. Let me turn it over to Carla and Henning. Are you there? Oh, I can see Carla. Hey, Carla, good to see you.
Hi, good to see you too.
And is Henning there too?
I'm here too. I'm supporting Carla.
There you are. Hey, Henning. All right, well, wonderful. It's great to have you. We're really excited about what you're going to be presenting here. And we have, so we typically have an hour for our group meeting, and we have two presentations. So that leaves us half an hour for your presentation. And if you could, leave some time, maybe 10 minutes to 15 minutes for folks to ask questions, that would be fantastic.
I will. Yeah, I'll definitely do that. Even if it means cutting myself off, I'll do that.
Good. I appreciate that. Thanks, Carla. I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks. So this project has its genesis in a paper I wrote in 2017 called Conceptualizing Crypto Law. In it, I argued that smart contracts could be used to implement law and therefore bring the law on the books closer to the law in action, the way it's written, closer to the way it actually functions. I used the Article 9 filing system as an example. And then on Twitter, Professor Matt Bruckner challenged me. He said, that's a really cool idea, but can you build it? Is it actually possible though? And at the time, the truth was I could not because I don't code. But around the same time that Henning was commenting on that paper, Conceptualizing Crypto Law, I was commenting on his first draft of the Lexan white paper. And now that Lexan exists as a thing that works, I've been able to, with some help from Henning, finally meet the Twitter challenge. And so why the financing statement, the UCC1 form anyway? Why did I pick that as an example way back when? So what is it? First, it's for those of you who either never took secured transactions or wish you hadn't, and so you've tried to forget. It's the form that if you're a secured party, you file in order to perfect certain collateral that certain assets, you're secure. So it's to perfect your security interest that you've taken in certain assets that you're claiming as collateral, right? It's intended essentially to serve a notice function, to let future potential lenders know that you have, or you may have anyway, a pre-existing security interest in that the assets that they're also thinking about taking as collateral. The problem is that in practice, in the real world, this filing system rarely works as an actual notice system. And so we've created all sorts of rules in the UCC in order to get the system as close to functioning the way it was intended as possible. And the key difficulties ultimately, and most of the things the rules are trying to get at, is what happens when the parties in the system don't actually have the same information, right? The difficulties lie in creating a system that actually allows parties that don't know each other to have access to the same record of evolving facts over time. And that is why it's a perfect use case for blockchain technology and smart contracts. At its core, blockchain technology helps untrusted parties that don't know each other necessarily, come to an agreement about the existence and evolution of shared facts between them. And so that's the why. So it's also worth noting a couple of goals that I had in building the code for the UCC1 form. First of all, the goal is to automate as many existing Article 9 rules related to the UCC financing statement as possible. And the reason to do that is to try and show that this could work under existing law, that we wouldn't need to change necessarily anything in the UCC to make this useful. But then also to point out where possible that there are potential innovations that could be made using smart contracts. And there are two in particular that I've identified and that have been incorporated into the sample code. So the idea is, and the argument really is, that even if all I did was achieve these two things, automate as many of the existing rules as possible and demonstrate two potential new innovations in that regard, that the reality is doing those two things alone might have some significant ripple effects that enable the simplification of Article 9, the rules and how they apply in practice. Okay, so briefly about Lexon. Lexon is a new type of programming language. And here I defer to Henning if I mess anything up, but briefly and at a high level, it's a new type of programming language that it's English, right? So I write English, it reads like English, and you really don't have to study coding at all to know how to use it. So in my case, I read the white paper. He now has very helpful books that make it even easier for me to understand. But at the time, I read the white paper and at the end of the day of a UCC focused conference. And then I sat down for a couple hours and just tried to write it, to write the code. So anybody can try their hand at it. I've had a student this last semester try her hand at it. It can also can be run as JavaScript program on Office servers, but it can also be run as smart contracts on top of a blockchain. And it also creates its own interfaces. Ultimately, then, Lexon is a new type of programming language, a new generation, sixth generation, I'm told, although this, again, isn't my area of expertise. And the idea generated from a recognition that judges, so if you were to write smart contracts or contracts in using smart contracts or contracts in code, judges in the event of a dispute wouldn't ever actually read the code. So the idea was to provide them code that they could read. But in reality, it ended up being useful for far more things than expected. And this is one of those unexpected things that Lexon is useful for. So with that background on the project, the why, the goals, and Lexon, we'll look at the actual thing that I'm building with Henning's help. So this is the current UCC1 form, right? And I shouldn't say current because really what I've built is no different than this. It's just intended to digitize this, right? But this is the PDF version. And in some states, this is all you get. You can download the PDF, fill it out, print it out, and take it in. Maybe you can file it online too, but you're still using a PDF, right? But you'll see there's an area for the filer's information, the debtor's information, including their name, address, the secured parties, similar information, and then an area where you describe the collateral. There are similar forms like this for amendments, which aren't pictured here, but the idea is what we've built would be able to serve as both, because they're really not that different. You just like check a box to say what it is, and there's an extra like box for putting the file number that the amendment relates to, et cetera. So this is the existing form. This is, in order to turn this into smart contract code, I started with the definitions. And so The definitions in the UCC to start with is the file number. So the file number is a number assigned to the initial financing statement. The filing office, namely the office designated by the state to be the place where you file the filing statement or the financing statement. And then it's the filing office is the one authorized to assign the file number to the financing statement. So these are the exact words on my screen. This is the exact words from the UCC. Turning them into definitions in Lexon, they look like this. What I'm about to show you also includes a couple of other definitions that I'll walk through, but it looks like this, right? English, okay, the first thing to point out. But the file number, the idea is the file number that the filing office would assign is a hash. The filer, the debtor, the secured party, the collateral, and the UCC category collateral are all fillable terms, just like the existing form, right? So all it's doing is representing the existing form in code, but it would be the same thing, right? You, the secured party, you'd go to the website, you'd log in with your credentials, and then you'd fill out a digital form, but this would be operating in the background. And the things you'd be filling in are the filer, the debtor, the secured party, the collateral, and if any, using any UCC categories of collateral, that as well. The filing office is defined as, and what is expected to happen there is that the filing office would just say it's me, right? But this is designed to be a template that any state could use, so it's there as a definable term, right? To show you would just put the filing office's information in. The piece about the digital asset collateral, just note that it's there as a defined term, and we'll come back to why, but that goes to one of the sort of potential innovations. And then you'll note all this stuff starts about financing statements and continuation statements, right? And that's the next thing that I turned to. In particular, the UCC uses a certain terminology to refer to financing statements. The financing statement, for its part, is actually like a set of records relating to anything that relates to the initial financing statement. So you have the initial one you file, and then you can file amendments, including continuation statements, including termination statements, and the whole thing, the whole file of all of those is called the financing statements. So in this Lexon version, we've mirrored that terminology as closely as possible. So we've got the financing statement, meaning the initial financing statement, so the original, plus a list of amendments. That list of amendments is defined separately. The initial financing statement itself is a defined term. And then the rest, the three lines below those three defined terms are all things sort of, how do I say, back end things, sort of things to make the rest of it work, to make the clauses below work properly. But the idea, again, is to mirror the existing language of the UCC as closely as possible, so that we don't need to go reforming the whole thing, right, in order to try and adopt this, which wouldn't happen politically. So now we've got the definitions. You're like, that's cool. What does the thing actually do? The first thing to know is, again, the filing office assigns unique numbers to each record file, so the hashes, right? And then has to make them available for search by the public. The file number has some specific characteristics required in the UCC, which I think can be fulfilled by using a hash as the file number. All the amendments have to be relatable back to the initial financing statement, which we've achieved by using the hash as the file number that you sort of associate all the rest of them with, and you have the list of amendments that way. And then the one thing, though, to know is, so the filing office is responsible for all of this, and yet they might mess it up. And indeed, they do mess it up from time to time, probably more often than filing offices want to admit. And the result is the party that bears the risk is actually the future folks thinking about lending against that same collateral, right? So if they go and search and they can't find an existing financing statement because of an indexing error on the filing office's part, they may go ahead and lend, thinking that there was no pre-existing security interest, thinking that they have first priority when in fact they do not, right? And the UCC says that such errors do not render the financing statement invalid or ineffective. The first filing party will still have first priority, even though there was no way for the second party to actually have notice. So all these things are required of the filing office, but if the filing office messes it up, the party bearing the risk is the second or the future lending party. We've tried to both automate the things the filing office should do or is required to do, but then as a result, effectively limit the risk for the future filing folks. So we've done this largely through the recital. So it says the filer is the one that fills out the fillable areas, just like in the existing form. And then the filer can either set the amendment filing number, which is what you would do if you're using this to amend a pre-existing initial financing statement, or they don't. And if they don't, then the filing number is automatically the hash of the file, right? So we've automated what the filing office is supposed to do, and the indexing errors shouldn't occur really at all. And thereby we've limited the risk that is normally associated with indexing areas for folks. So the point here is, like, even just the definitions help or have ripple effects in the system. By making the existing system actually work the way it's intended to, then we've limited risk to the parties operating in the system, even in the most simplest of ways. So I'm already running close on time, so I'll show you a bit more, but I won't have time to show you all of it. But another example comes from UCC 9515, which is really determining how long financing statements are good for, how long they're effective for. They are effective for 5 years. And then if you can continue their effectiveness, renew it essentially, if you file a continuation statement, an amendment, within the 6 months just preceding the end of the first 5 years, or the 5 years. And if you do that, then you get another 5 years, right? A continuing rolling 5-year basis. Problem is, lots of people forget about the 6-month continuation window, and the thing lapses, which is a problem because if it lapses, you lose your perfection and priority, right? With regard to that collateral. So the idea is, what if we, what if we automate the fact that they are only good for 5 years? And then this is one of the areas of potential improvements as well. And at that, I'll stop. But the automation is to just say, look, you get 5 years, that's the lapse date. So you set the lapse date, you say that there is such thing as a continuation window. And then if you file a continuation statement, you automatically get another 5 years, and the lapse date resets itself. A potential innovation here, using smart contracts to incentivize folks to do what they're supposed to or what they would want to do. You could have secured parties put into escrow a reminder fee, right? And say, hey, filing office, if you were to send a reminder to me, within that 6-month window or just prior, and tell me that I need to remember to file a financing statement, I'm willing to pay you a fee for that service. And so you put the reminder fee into escrow, and then the filing office sends you a reminder or not, as the filing office chooses. And it either earns the fee or not. If it sends you the reminder, the escrow contract releases the fee to the filing office. And if it doesn't send the reminder, then the reminder fee stays there until the termination of the financing statement, at which point it's returned to the secured party. So there are several other places where automation can and we have tried to implement in Lexon, but I'm out of time. And so I'll stop there in favor of questions, if any.
Great. Well, thank you. Using Lexon? Have you tried? I don't think you've tried, other financial statements other than the UCC financial statements.
You know, this is a financing statement specific to the UCC. Yeah. So I'm only trying to, the object is only to automate that one. Yeah.
What's your kind of, I mean, I understand this is, you know, for just from a research perspective, this is already a very interesting project, but what is your kind of long-term goal for this project? Where do you see this go?
So long term, I hope it's adopted by states, and there are several actually considering it, or something like it, maybe, right? And so hopefully, I hope it gets taken up in actual practice. But it does a couple of things more broadly for the legal literature. One, it shows use of smart contracts completely unrelated to contract law. So there's way too much law and smart contracts legal academic literature that focuses only on like, is smart contracts, are they enforceable under contract law? And that's really not that interesting of a question at this point. And so I want to remind folks that smart contracts are more than just, they're often not, I should say, they are often not intended to be used as legally enforceable contracts. And here's an extremely good example of when that's true. So it's just stands as a reminder of like what smart contracts are to legal folks. And then it also just shows it's the first iteration of a crypto legal structure, which is what I hypothesized in that first paper in 2017. So long-term, the goal is to continue to make other examples of things like this.
Mm-hmm. Jeffrey's asking, has this initiative been coordinated with any tech vendors that serve filing offices? That's critical to find first adopters.
No, so nope, but it has been vetted through folks who through the filing office. I'd say is the ABA filing office committee, subcommittee. And so to the extent that one of my main concerns is that the filing office, so a state should consider to pick it up, a filing office objects and freaks out, right? Or the folks whose industry depends on interacting with the filing office is concerned and blocks its use. So the first place I've been vetting this is with them, so that they can get comfortable with it and not move to block it right away, should it ever be proposed in real life.
Okay.
Sorry, Roland, can I talk a bit?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Who is this?
Because I tried to raise my hand, but I can't find it on screen. Okay, back to my question. I think it was misunderstood. I did not ask about all financial statements, even the UCC, the one that you're concentrating on. There are ways of expressing English in sense, expressivity, that you cannot express in such a simplified language like Lexon. That was my question. So were you able to express everything you needed to express in that UCC statement in this simplified language?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is one of the lessons of the project is that I couldn't just sit down and copy the code out of the UCC. Like that's not what this is. Nevertheless, functionally, yes, everything that's required of the financing statement from the UCC and more, right? So not just the requirements of the UCC one form itself, but actually rules that have been built up, to mediate errors in filing. Some of those are automated too, right? But not because I sat down and was like, oh, that's what it says. Here, let me type it out in English. Rather, you have to think about what the function of the rule in the code is and achieve that function in the Lexon code. It doesn't have to match word for word, but the function has to match. And that's one of the lessons of the project, that for lawyers thinking about writing contracts, whether they're enforceable contracts or just trying to automate regulations, it's not going to be a thing where we sit down and we look at the law and we're like, oh, just paste that into Lexon and we're done. No. There's a step in between, a translation step.
I mean, I know that. I work on language knowledge representation, so I know that you don't do that. But it's plain English code or formal language is not a new idea. It has been tried forever. At Boeing, they tried simplified language. It's called simplified English for their specification. And people find more often, that's why I asked the question, and you replied saying that you were able to express this. My question is that usually people find that these languages so because they are so formal, you know, like code. I mean, it's a code. It's a that you cannot express everything you want to express. But you answered my question that for this particular application you were able to. That's it. But in general, this is not an obvious. You know, like people have tried this for the last 50 years. It's not new. It's not. I'm sorry, it's not new. I mean, the new thing is that you're able to do it on the blockchain, which didn't exist 50 years ago. But that's
so
all.
if you're talking about the code, it's not my, Lexon isn't my invention, right? But the UCC1 form is the part that I've been like, I don't know anything. I'm not a computer scientist. I don't know anything about that. What I know is that this is the first time I've been able to code anything ever. And that, yes, I could do everything that I needed to do in Lexon.
I think, yes, I think that is, Jan, I think from my perspective, that's the innovation. I'm not familiar with these other previous efforts. I mean, I understand that people have been trying to do it, but I think what Lexon's trying to do is to make it possible for the non-programmer to express this legal code in a way that's sufficiently expressive for the respective application. And so that's, I think that is, from my perspective, that's the innovation, that you have a language that is usable by folks who are not programmers, and it doesn't take a whole lot of training. I think, Carla, how long did it take you to be able to do this?
Yeah, so like I said, I sat down in the evening in my hotel room after a conference and read Henning's white paper, the original, and that took like an hour and a half. And then I tried writing it. It took like 2 hours to try the first iteration. I didn't get it quite right the first time, right? So I took that to Henning and said, you know, what am I missing? And then he worked it through with me. And I think we've like maybe spent an hour here or there 3 or 4 times over the year or so, right? So it really wasn't that big of a time-intensive process for someone who has like zilch coding skills to make happen.
Okay. Heather is asking, how will these filings integrate with UCC filings that do not use the UCC1 form as the statute permits?
Yeah, so I don't know that they would, right? So I would view this as another option. So I don't think this becomes like a mandatory thing. I think I think it falls within the safe harbor. I think that it should be treated just like filing the physical UCC1 form, but I don't think it interacts with the other ones at all, and it doesn't obviate their use either. Like they just keep on doing what the statute permits if they want to, or they can use this.
Then Mark is asking, are you looking for funding for the project?
Am I looking for, I wouldn't say no. I don't really know what that means, but I'm happy to chat later.
I mean, I guess there's a separate question, you know, is that for your project, or, you know, maybe the question also is for Lexon. I don't know.
Yeah, for Lexon, that's probably a better question for Henning.
But okay, so then Cole is saying, is there preferred blockchain digital ledger, distributed ledger technology platform for Lexon, or does Lexon play nice with different ledgers and virtual machines?
So this is a good question for Henning if he wants to jump in, but the answer is it plays nice with several.
Sure. Thank you, Carla. No, it's made to be an access actually between different natural languages and different blockchain languages. But we're also working on our own Lexon blockchain, if you want, to integrate optimally with the potential that Lexon has.
All right. Scott's saying, if you, thanks for a great new blockchain coding Lexon presentation. Henning and Carla, broadly, what did you see as you helped code it from a European Union perspective in terms of GDRP and languages? Did you think about, I mean, GDRP is probably not an issue at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's specifically helped by a European Union's perspective, actually. Probably looking at both common law and civil law has helped to be sure that it will be a globally useful tool. So in that sense, it has certainly been helped. And there's a more systematic approach maybe to law on continental Europe, but by and large, I think there's a lot of focus on applicability in the US.
Mm-hmm. Got it. All right, I think that's all the questions. I see folks have some more words of appreciation. You know, Heather loves the project, and I think if folks have additional follow-up questions, if you could maybe just put your email addresses into the chat, that'd be great, so that they can reach out directly to you. But yeah, thank you so much, Carla and Henning. Thank you so much for sharing the project with us. It's very cool, and we look forward to tracking where it's going to take you next.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having
us. And I hope also on sort of the political side, you know, I don't know what the status is. I mean, that, you know, would have been an interesting question too. Like, what's the status there in terms of getting the, you know, the different organizations to adopt this approach?
Briefly, I'm working with folks interested in 3 states looking to potentially adopt it. But I'm not sure I'm allowed to say much more than that at this point.
I see.
But there are at least 3 states considering.
Okay, great. Well, thanks again. It's been great to have you. And yeah, we're about sort of at the halfway mark now. So thank you again. Quick round of applause. And yeah, please keep us posted. And I will now turn it over to our next speaker. And that is John. John, are you there?
I am there. How are you doing, Roland?
Good. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
And you will be talking about the GREMLIN platform and what you're up to with that.
Absolutely.
So take it away, John.
Thanks very much. So I'm just going to share my screen. Awesome. Hi, everyone. So as Roland said, my name is John Scordato. I'm here to present to you today about my open source project, GREMLIN. The best way I can think of to describe it is it's a legal process automation platform. So I'll get into more detail about what that means, as well as do a short demo for you. But I think just starting out, the best way to think about it is it's a tool that lets you create essentially digital production lines for highly customized legal work product. And I'm going to take a quick journey through the evolution of legal technology. And I think that a tool like GREMLIN fills a need that currently is not easy to fill with the current set of tools that exist for law firms and legal practitioners. So I think you're probably all familiar with the traditional legal model. You know, the concept of learned professionals. You know, law firms for the longest time didn't even want to admit that they were for-profit businesses, and there's still, you know, some folks who would quibble around the edges of that statement. But I'm not going to get into that, delve into something too political. But I think people have recognized that while that model has a lot of benefits and it can deliver a lot of fantastic value, it does have some downsides, and that it can be expensive and often inefficient. So, you know, in recent years, we've seen the development of legal technology. And, you know, this is not something that's new. It's been evolving for decades, right? I mean, first it was email, then it was Microsoft Word and Excel. I think where we are today, and again, I'll stop caveating everything I say shortly, but just another caveat, there's always exceptions. But I would argue that where we are today as an industry with legal technology is there's currently a focus on efficiency and standardization. And what I mean by legal tech is, and again, there's so many things that could fall under this umbrella, but I'm talking about things like document automation, transaction management, AI contract analysis, and data extraction, and I'm sure there's plenty of other categories we could come up with. I think, you know, these things have created a tremendous amount of value. They offer a lot of very interesting capabilities, but they definitely do come with a couple of downsides. And, you know, one, they can be very, very opinionated. Standardization is good, but it has its price. A lot of times these things are for-profit commercial products. So that opinionation is also tied into vendor lock-in, right? You get a product that's built to do something the way a vendor thinks you ought to do it, or the way that it's reasonable to do it on their product, and you're kind of stuck doing it that way. And so the picture in the background here, I think this is a good analogy that I'm going to take through to the rest of the presentation. I don't know if you can tell what that is, but those are mugs going through a production line. And let's say there's 10,000 of them here, and they're white mugs. They're all the same. You could think about a lot of tools we have today as potentially just production lines, right? Where someone says, look, you want to do 1,000, structured financing transactions. Here's how our product works. We can do as many as you need as quickly as you want, but they have to be white mugs and they're going to come out looking like this. Now, of course, again, around the edges, there's ways to customize things. You can certainly find products designed for specific use cases, or you can build your own. But I think generally, you're sort of in this paradigm where you can buy the special purpose production line to build something very specific, and it's hard to customize because of lock-in, because of opinionation. Or you can go back to the classic model of the lawyer as a craftsman, and both of those solutions have their place, but there is a missing piece here, right? Let's say you don't want 10,000 white mugs. You actually want 1,000 wine glasses and 500 tumblers and 100 shot glasses. And maybe you want some to be green and some to be blue, and you want some to have a logo on them, and you want some to be a little taller than the others. As you might imagine, if you're talking about producing these things, we're probably using very similar tools and techniques, but a one-size-fits-all machine isn't going to do it here. So how do we solve this problem of mass customization where, if you're at a law firm, or even if you're a solo practitioner, right, and you're dealing with tasks that are repetitive but not identical? There is a problem there. And again, I know there are solutions that exist that are meant to address this, but I think generally there's a bit of a gap there. In my own personal background, I have a degree in operations management, or a certificate in operations management. I've worked with additive manufacturing and some modern production techniques. So I looked to something that we probably don't often look to in law, although some folks have, and that is, how do people address this problem in manufacturing? Because mass customization is not a new problem. It's not a new problem in law, and it's not a new problem in manufacturing. However, manufacturing, I think, is much, much further along in addressing this. And one of the ways that people have looked at solving this problem is the concept of Industry 4.0. And that means a lot of different things, but I think the way I've broken it down that I really want to illustrate how analogous it is to law is, it's this idea that you can modularize your production. And if you really tightly couple innovation with prototyping and production, you can essentially design systems that are very flexible and agile, so that when a new request comes in and someone says, hey, I love that contract, or I want a deal that's very similar to the deal for X, but I need to change these couple of things, you can very quickly have folks who can change that design, test it, prototype it, and then make it available in production, which in the case of legal, as we'll get to with Gremlin, is essentially creating this automation tool that any normal person who doesn't want to know how to code, doesn't need to know how to code, can just click a button and enjoy the benefits of automation and the benefits of customization without having to be a coder, without having to pay a fortune for a specific tool or a machine. So Gremlin kind of takes that paradigm, right? The idea that we should have a place where it's really easy to prototype, really easy to test, and then we can basically take that testing and prototyping and immediately put it into production, which again means an average Joe can just come in, click a button, and use all of that complexity without having to actually understand how it works or what it does, and can enjoy the benefits of automation with the efficiency and the speed, with that other benefit of the traditional legal model, the customization and the complexity. So the architecture of Gremlin, I'll show you a demo shortly, but basically the idea here is there's a ton of fantastic tooling out there in the Python ecosystem. For those of you who are programmers, or those of you who are not, Python is a programming language. Almost all, or a lot of machine learning and natural language processing today is done in Python, and it's very, if you're familiar with the language, it's very easy to consume and use a tremendous amount of open source tooling to do natural language processing and AI, as well as document automation, data analysis. There's a ton of things you can do with Python, and it's generally very easy to do it. And if you have a very custom task you want to do, writing a Python script in code for a coder is typically pretty easy. The problem we run into is, all right, well, we write this script. Now, how do we let a lawyer use it? And that's been the problem, right? We have all these fantastic resources, but if we want to take it from a proof of concept where, say someone wants to redact 100 PDFs, or they'd like to extract 50 very, very specific things from a set of contracts, it's been very challenging to build those very highly specific tools and deliver them to an end user. And one of the approaches people have taken around that is to try to build very, very complex systems that can kind of do it all. But what if we could essentially say, look, I know that I have to do a task that requires a couple of very specific things that are really, and take my word for this, not that difficult to develop in, say, Python. And I want to be able to essentially put them together and then give it to a lawyer so that they don't have to know anything about the code or even know the code's there. And they can be able to do that redaction, or they can be able to, do that contract analysis on that very, very specific task. And I don't need to have either a machine that does everything or pay someone to develop a custom product. That's where Gremlin comes in. It's designed to let you take very simple snippets of Python code, as well as contracts, put them into the platform, and the platform will automatically handle all of the platform components of applying that logic to contracts, to legal work product, so that essentially it creates digital production lines for you where, let's say you want to do a contract analysis and you want to identify all the clauses for something very specific. And for whatever reason, you don't want to use one of those kind of all-purpose products that are out there. You want to use something that's academic that is available in Python. You can essentially take that script, take a contract, put it into Gremlin, and Gremlin handles all the back-end work to essentially make it into something that a very, very, I don't want to say technically illiterate, but someone who's not a tech-savvy user could use. So that's sort of what Gremlin does. I know that's probably very abstract, so I'm going to do a live demo. Hopefully the demo gods are kind to me, and I hope it makes it clear what exactly this thing does. So give me 1 second here. All right, so this is the login portal for Gremlin. There's sort of two components. I'm going to show you the production component first, which is where an average user, like a lawyer, could essentially come in and say, hey, that script you told me about that's supposed to do that analysis on a certain type of contract, I need to run that. Can I run that on, say, 50 contracts? I'll show you how they would consume something like that, just to give you a sense of how easy this can be. And then I'll kind of show you some of the more complex stuff that's only available for more technically advanced users. That's sort of more akin to a low code system, but again, designed with this idea of sort of production lines. So first I'll log in as a lawyer. And this is a relatively simple interface where basically it just says, hey, what do you want to do? Do you want to either look for something you've already done, view results, or do you want to analyze a document? So I'll click analyze. And here I have a menu, if you will, of production lines. So in this case, I have pre-trained some AI classifiers, NLP classifiers on the Atticus project's legal clause corpus, which if you're not familiar with it, is a really cool project. It's just getting started, but they basically created a very nice corpus of clause labels. So I took those clause labels, I trained up a custom classifier, and I'll show you the code later, but basically I threw it into Gremlin, and now I can deliver it to a user without having to basically build a very custom built product around it. So, I'm a user, I come in and say, all right, I want to use this Atticus classifier. Hit next. I give it a name, so it's called Atticus test. I can give an email, so if I want to get a notification when it's done, I can get that. I hit next. Then I'll just add a document. And I'll hit open. And I could upload multiple documents. In this case, I'm just doing one, but it scales automatically. So, if you had 100 documents, it would run it on each of those 100 documents too. There's no need to just do one. So we can see this has been uploaded, and I hit start. Basically, that starts running in the background. And when it's done, I'll get an email notification, as well as over on the right here, you see it says no results yet. It will package up what my code is doing on the back end and essentially spit out a document for me. So this is going to take probably about another 10, 20 seconds, maybe a little less. And once that's done, yep, there we go. I'll show you what I got back. Okay, so this is the document, which basically now has all these labels built into it. So, we can see there's some profit sharing stuff. There's some audit rights. Most of these are pretty good. The Atticus corpus is a little thin still, so the F score on these is not as good as I'd like it to be, but it's impressively good for only having like 200 contracts in there. So this is just one example of what you could do with this. And I think the really cool part about this is the code that it took to do this is about 150 lines of Python code, which obviously I know most lawyers wouldn't know how to do. But the idea here is I can deliver this really complex tool, which as a coder I can develop relatively easily. And it took me less than a day to develop the actual Python script. But now I can make it available to an end user in a GUI or through an API. And I think that's kind of the really cool part about Gremlin is it essentially lets us take some really complex behavior and then modularize it and deliver it in a way that can be used in sort of a modern law firm architecture. I'm running a little short on time, but I'm going to jump over to the advanced part of the platform just to show you kind of how things are set up and created. And then I'll open it up to questions. So this is the admin dashboard. This is meant for technically advanced users who would actually be developing and administering these things. Everything is sort of broken down into this concept of scripts. So in the case of the Atticus classifiers, I can come in here and I have a code editor, and all right, it's a little more code than I said. I said 150, it's 280. But basically, this is the Python code that is producing that markup that you just saw. And the concept again here is you create these scripts, and once they're in the system, we can then combine them into these digital production lines, which are called pipelines in here. And you can start to create some complex behavior. So if we click on the Atticus classifier pipeline, you can see that basically this is fairly simple, but if I wanted to say, take the output of that markup and then do something else with it. So let's say I wanted to take all of those clauses that were found and create a report, we could do that. So we could basically add another node or another script that's already in our database. We could search. In this case, let's say we wanted to create a .docx file. We could add a node to do that. We could throw that in the pipeline. We can wire that up. And basically, again, the way the system is designed is it's just passing things from node to node to node. And then when it's done, it packages them up into a format that is relatively easy for a user to consume. Or you could just send to some kind of computerized tool. So just real quick, I'll show you the docx one. You can also test this here. So I mentioned the importance of being able to innovate and iterate on the platform. And then if you like what you see, you can use it. That's something you can do here. So we just flip it over into test mode. And in this case, I can then just run this right in here. And I don't have to give it a document because of how this is set up. I'm not going to go into that, but just hit start test. And sorry, this is in my way. There we go. Start test. It ran. I'll download the test results. And you're going to see there's actually a .docx file in here, which if we wanted to, we could customize. I don't think I have time to show you that, but I think you'll get the point. So one second. Yeah, so I mean, this no title provided. This is just the current date. So it's I could customize it and show you, but basically we can provide data on the fly, and that can get injected into here and create a custom report. So, really what we're doing here is just radically reducing the cost and expense of creating specific custom tools, and then delivering those in a modular, easy to use way so that people on the back end who are more technically savvy can kind of mix and match, and then people on the front end, so to speak, lawyers, can consume those in a way that doesn't require them to really know anything about coding or even the system itself. They just need to be able to search for whatever production pipeline that they're looking for. And so, as I said, it's an open source project. I have a release version on GitHub. You're welcome to download it. It's Dockerized, so you can deploy it to cloud infrastructure. And I think one of the advantages of having something that's open source is people can customize this. If this doesn't do what they want, if there are features that they need, or they want to create a very specific use case, they're more than welcome to. So yeah, with that, I think I'm running a little short, and I'll open it up to questions.
Thank you, John. This is very interesting. So so it's an open source project. So are you planning to kind of build a business around this? And so this question one. Question two, as you were conceiving of this, did you have the legal industry use case in mind originally, or you had a broader use case in mind and you just think that legal might be an initial user of this?
Yeah, so on the commercialization question, I mean, I haven't given a lot of thought to that. Mostly I've been driven by seeing a need in legal. My day job is I work a lot with platforms and technologies in the legal tech space. And I think I've been a little frustrated with the fact that a lot of these platforms are closed. They're not open source. Even if so you can't, a lot of times you can't get data out of them very easily, and you can't customize them. And a lot of times I have these solutions which are like 95% of the way there, and I want to customize that last 5%, and I can't. And it sort of really throws a wrench in the works when you're trying to automate, legal process. So it started with the thought that this is something for legal. I point out that outside of legal, there are systems, there are data applications that have gotten some nice traction. One, if you guys are interested, is called Dagster, Dagster. I had discovered it after I started this project, but there are some really nice data applications outside of legal. But I think legal is sort of unique in the sense that we have a really relatively high need for simplicity and for a system that delivers technical complexity to people who don't necessarily have the aptitude to deal with it. So I think that sort of precludes most of the products that are out there, including some nice, again, open source projects that are in other industries. So I think this is very much designed around legal, and I think legal has some unique constraints where I hope this product or project would be, a nice way to fix that.
Okay.
Hope that answers the question.
I'm gonna read out some of the questions as folks put it to the chat. So first from Jana, who's asking, what commercial domains that the Atticus corpus is covering. Anita?
Yeah, so their corpus, they pulled off of Edgar. I don't think they have a specific focus on a specific industry. It's general corporate clauses though. So, like ROFRs, most favored nation clauses, parties, kind of like basic corporate clauses. If you're interested, their GitHub is online. It's public. You can go in there. You can see both their labels as well as the corpus itself. And if you look at my GitHub, my username is JSV4. You can find the classifiers I trained. It's a public repository. So yeah, I mean, it's just mostly general corporate stuff.
And Jeffrey is saying Gremlin is outrageously good as a vision. It's an awesome utility in structured financing, bond offerings, loan documents. I can see how that, when you can do this kind of run this kind of analysis, I think it might be very interesting in those settings. Nonopa is asking, since it's open source, does it mean that anyone can use the code to create their own software or legal tech company without any IP issues?
Yeah, well, it's the current license is Afro GPL, so that's a little. You can do anything you want with it, but you do have to contribute code back, including if you're deploying as a SaaS product. So yeah, you can do whatever you want with it, and that's the goal. My hope is that this kind of an infrastructure project would benefit pretty much every player in the industry. And I don't think the core of it is something that is a competitive advantage in and of itself. So I think there's a strong incentive for us all to contribute to it. But certainly, as long as you comply with the AGPL license, you can do whatever you want with it. The code's available, so have at it.
Okay, Michael's saying this is more of a statement than a question. It says, interesting OCR-like doc analysis via Python with friendly creation tools, really fascinating. And Cole is saying closed source makes him think of services like Kira, Juro, or Ironclad, and he's including that open source is definitely needed.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so good comments. Good. And yeah, do you have any? So do you already have some folks in law firms or in-house departments kind of look at this and use it, or you just sort of getting it out there right now?
Yeah, it's just about at the point where I think it's mature enough that that's a conversation that's worth having. You know, it's again, it's a work in progress. I consider this a beta release. I mean, functionality I'm really happy with, but there's definitely a couple things around the edges that could need more work. But it's usable, and I've built prototypes that do OCRing. I have a prototype that does extraction from safes. I have a prototype that does the classifications you just saw. There's another prototype for document clustering. So there's a bunch of different sort of samples. And my hope was that now that I've reached this point where I have the samples and the core seems to be running really nicely, you know, getting it out there and having more people in a position to test it and contribute could really start to foment more of those conversations. So the short answer is no, no one that I know of at least is using it in production. But it's only been publicly available for a couple weeks, and I really think that there's a lot of potential. So I'd be delighted if people wanted to use it in any capacity, and more than happy to help if people reach out to me.
Yeah, it seems like that's what people are planning to do. You know, folks really saying this is great, and they'll be using it, and lots of potential. So.
Awesome.
Yeah, it is very cool, and I think it'd be very interesting. I would love for you to come back and share with us in a couple of months as to what the specific examples are, and use cases that people have started using it for. I think that would be really, really interesting. But it seems like a really great tool, and I really appreciate you coming in and sharing it with us and our community. And yeah, please keep us posted. We're giving you a quick round of applause. Thank you. And thank you also, Carla and Henning, for joining us today and sharing your amazing work. And we'll be closing up. We're pretty much at the end of our time. And also, John, please, John, put in your email address if you could. So if people want to follow up with you directly, they can reach you. Just drop your email address, please, in the chat if you could. And
No problem.
Susan, what's coming in next week? Do we have something? Do we have a session next week?
We do. So please come back and see us next week. Same time, same channel.
We'll soon. And good to see you all. And we'll see you next week. And stay safe. And thanks for joining us today. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.